Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. As we start 2025, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. A lot of you asked questions about how did I design the railway, how did I set the wiring, how did I build it, and so I thought I'd start the year by doing a bit of a series that goes through all those questions. Probably going to do about 5 videos that'll take you through the track plan and the design, wiring and control, buildings and scenery, building the layout itself, and finally operating and maintaining the layout. I'm hoping this will be something that you'll find interesting and give you a bit of an insight into what it's like to own and operate a G-scale garden railway. As I mentioned, this episode is going to really focus on the design of the railway itself, so the track plan and the garden and how these two things are going to come together. So this video is going to be in 2 main parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about the thoughts and process that went through the overall design, the considerations and the things that were rattling around in my head while I was playing with the track planning software. The second part of this, I'm going to show you the track plan on the screen, and I want to talk you through a little bit the different aspects and how those considerations and those ideas I had originally then actually manifest in the final railway that I have today. I think the most important thing, just to clarify where we started, is I knew I was going to start with a blank slate. There was a garden here already when I moved in. It was open, it was a paved garden with some borders, but realistically, I didn't have much I needed to work with. And actually, during the initial stages of design, I realized I was going to rip out anything that actually was in the garden. Now, that's not always the case for various different reasons, and I think you've got 2 options when you start designing a garden railway. You can either do what the real railways do and have to accommodate existing features and land, maybe that's the terrain type, maybe that's existing flower beds, or you can start from scratch, which I had the advantage of doing in my case. The other consideration I had to make was, where did I want to put it? Obviously, it's out in the garden, but there's different heights you can build a railway at. Some people build the railway at ground level, some people will build them up on supports, and some people build them in raised flower beds. Mine's a raised railway, so it sits in flower beds that are separated from the garden. And there's one other thing I sort of want to mention about this is it's the aesthetic or vibe that you go for your garden railway. I wanted a garden railway. Some people have a railway in their garden, which means that the garden takes prominence over the railway. Some people have a garden around the railway, where the garden is somewhat secondary to the railway. None of these are wrong. And I think that the first rule of anything in garden railways or model railways generally, it's your railway. You can do what you want, and whatever aesthetic or whatever vibe fits you, your lifestyle, your family. I think that's the most important thing. I mentioned before that I had decided to really start with a blank slate, and I really wanted to make an investment in this. And this is a question that comes up quite a lot. It's like, how much should I spend? How much did it all cost? What I can say, I don't want to give an exact number, partly because I don't want to see the number myself, but also I think sometimes when we talk about garden railways, people can be off-put by the price. I think the main thing that I would say in here is I spent the few years before this really building up a stockpile of track, primarily bought on eBay. The collection steadily grew. When I started building the garden railway, yes, there was a lot of extra track that I had to buy to fill into the track plan to make sure it was going to work exactly how I wanted it to. And that was an investment, and that definitely took saving up in beforehand. But it was a childhood dream. And sort of the phrase that I often use with people is, I don't drink that much, don't do drugs, don't gamble. This is my vice, this is my investment. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the going into it. Where did I get ideas for the style or the aesthetic of the railway that I wanted? So most of the trains and most of the models that I have are European narrow gauge. They're made by a company called LGB. And so that was definitely the aesthetic I was going to go for. This means probably single track, meandering around, passing between trees and rocks. And I really wanted that kind of style of a garden railway, where the garden and the railway really came together. Looking through track plans, there's a few different sources that I use that are really helpful. The first one is there's a PDF available online. I'll put a link in the description below to an old LGB technical and track planning guide. Now, the copy I have is only in German, and my German is not great, but if you just want to look at the picture and the track plans, that's a really great source. The other one that I had was a book called The World of LGB when I was a kid, which would be this one. This also has a selection of track plans available just for a little bit of inspiration. I'll also include a link to the PDF of that below. Now, there's a couple of other different places that I then used. The first one is going to be online forums. So places like gscaleCentral.net was fantastic. It's a really great community of people that build both indoor and outdoor garden railways. And they share their track plans, their ideas and photographs. And that was a really good way for kind of getting a little bit of inspiration for the kind of things I wanted in my railway and things I didn't want in my railway, things that didn't really resonate with me. And then the final one, and this one is something I would really recommend for anybody interested in garden railways, whether you've been in it for years or just starting out, is the G-Scale Society. So the G-Scale Society is a global, but primarily UK-based community of people with an interest in G-Scale garden railways. Again, not just outdoor, but also inside. They produced 4 journals, magazines a year, which have a massive collection of information in them, from track plans to kit bashing and all those kind of things. So across these 4 sources, the LGB track plan book, the World of LGB book, the online forums, and the G-Scale Society, I was really to get this collection of ideas of things I like. I didn't follow one track plan perfectly. It was really for me about bringing together the different ideas of the different things that I'd seen other people do that I really liked and wanted to incorporate. So now let's talk a little bit about the considerations I had when designing the garden railway. I think I can probably break these down to 3 different sections. The first one is the functional requirements of the railway, what I wanted it to have for my own interest. The second one is the aesthetic requirements of the railway, what I wanted it to look like and how I wanted it to feel. And then the third one is the garden itself. How did I bring the railway into the garden? How did I make sure the garden had the things that I wanted from it? Things like a pond or an area to sit and have a beer and have a barbecue with my friends. So I'm going to go through those considerations individually and just talk through a little bit of my thinking behind them. So let's talk first of all about the functional requirements of the railway. And what do I mean by functional requirements? These are the things that I knew I wanted the railway to have in terms of its design. So the first thing is I knew I wanted to be able to leave the trains running, set them off and let them just go round and round. I had this image in my mind of being able to put the trains on, set them to go off round and round while I sat with a beer or a cup of tea or a barbecue or whatever and spent time with friends and family. And from then, I knew I wanted lots of visual and visual interest in that. So that very quickly moved on to having 2 separate lines, 2 separate loops of track that I could leave running and have the trains always moving, always something going on in the garden. Now, coupled to this, I knew I wanted both tracks to be connected. I didn't want to have to lift trains off in places or move them around. The idea being that every single piece of track should be accessible by any train wanting to go down the layout. So adding that in was another kind of consideration. And you'll see as I go through the track planning, these things came together, and there were many iterations of the track plan sketched out before I got to something that really was able to manifest. So next, originally I wanted the railway to be able to run into the garage, the idea being that in this space, this would be the workshop, the trains would be stored in storage tracks, and I'd be able to run them in and out straight from the garage. It's something I've seen online. I love the idea. Didn't actually end up executing as well as I wanted to, but that ended up being actually a factor in how the railway was built and the reason that it's the height off the ground it is. And the garage is slightly raised up off ground level. And now the last couple of points were actually about the track itself. So I knew I wanted my sidings on my passing tracks to be able to accommodate at least 3 LGB kind of longer bogie wagons, so the kind of things you get on the Hawes Railway, the Saxon Railway. That was an important factor for me. To get more in, that would be fantastic, but I understood that I wouldn't be running really long US outline trains. So that wasn't a major concern for me. And then finally, this generally is sort of the advice you get online, which is try and aim for a minimum of R3 curves. It's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, the great thing about LGB in particular is it runs on all the radius of curves from the really tight R1s all the way through to R5s or FlexiTrack. But aspirationally, I try to aim to keep it in R3s. I just think the trains look slightly nicer as they go more through gentle sweeping turns as harder turns. As I said, I had the luxury of having the space to do that and the availability of track to do this, but when I go back to the railway I had when I was younger, yeah, that was full of R1s and that worked fantastic. Okay, and then maybe now I can talk about how did I actually go about doing the design. It started old school with pen and paper, so I was able to roughly measure out the garden before I moved in. So I had a rough sense of the size and shape of the garden. The garden is a bit of an obscure shape. It's not just a nice perfect rectangle. And then basically from then I just started sketching out certain track lines. None of it was to scale. The corner radius was all over the place, but it sort of gave me a sense of what was possible. After that, when I was able to finally move in, I did have a decent number of track that, as I said, I'd collected over the years. And so I took it outside and just started laying down track, not even particularly connected, just trying to work out what worked in terms of space, what didn't, being able to walk around the track and see what it might look like from different angles. Did that over a few different weekends, playing around with it. And then I finally moved this on to a piece of track planning software. I'm on a Mac, so I need software that would work on OS X. I used a piece of software called Rail Modeler Pro, which is available from the App Store. And what this does, it has a library of track in all different scales, not just in G-scale, and was able to put an inventory in of what I had, which was really helpful, and then try and design the layout. And then anything that I would use that was outside of the inventory, it gave me a little kind of counter, so I knew how much extra track I would need to order, that was particularly helpful. Once I had that, I then sort of ordered the track that I thought I needed, went out and then laid it out, and then I worked with the builders a little bit to build the walls and the flower beds as I needed them to be. I'm not going to go into the specifics of building the railway in this video, but that's the high-level summary of how I designed the track itself. Okay, so this is the track plan for the Garden Railway. This is reasonably up to date. There's been a couple of tweaks and changes, but for the most part, that's it. Just a little bit of just for a little bit of context, I'm currently sat about here in the kitchen, and so the garden is out here. So the main thing you'll notice is there's 5 main stations. So Aspernau, Monbifeld, Barrettberg, Heffrac, and Stantau. And all the station names are plays on family surnames, or Germanized versions of them that my German friend Veronica very kindly helped me set up. So let's start with the left-hand side here on the branch line. So this is Aspernau. This is the terminus station, one of the biggest stations in the line. There's 3 platforms. So platform 1 would be here, platform 2 and 3 kind of sit in the middle here, and then there's a run around here. There's 4 head shunts, and then a 5th one over here, and they all lead out over a bridge. With a crossover here, so the trains can pull into the station, uncouple from the train, run around, and then connect up and take it out again. Originally, there were going to be electric uncouplers here, whereas actually I found that the manual uncouplers or the sticks worked quite well. So that's Aspernau. You can see here there is the bridge that crosses into the garage. Great original concept. Don't actually end up using it in reality because I don't have enough. So I have too much stock that fits on these sidings, and a lot of it's also stored in boxes, so I end up getting it out of boxes anyway. Then moving up here, we cross the Dresden-Brücke Bridge, which is a double LGV bridge. I could have connected this up originally as one big flower bed, but I thought it was nice to create a bit of a feature there. One of the things that I'm considering doing in the future is building this into a bit of a water feature, but the idea is this is kind of crossing a valley. Then we move into Monbifeld, which is just a small station with a passing siding. The track plan's actually a little bit incorrect because the head shunt here is actually on the other side because of where the bridge ended up. This comes round into a curved point and enters the lower loop. And so the lower loop, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can follow me here. So the lower loop runs here, runs down through this tunnel into Heffrac station, which again is quite a small station with just a passing siding, round here, across the bridge, and then follows this divergent route here, stays low, into Stantau station, which again has 3 platforms, runs out under a little bridge through another tunnel, and that's the bottom loop, and it'll happily keep going round and round there. Now we have the upper loop. So the upper loop, let's just start here at Barrettberg. So the upper loop is a double reverse loop, and so what that means is this track here comes out round to the back, runs here all along the back of the fence, and then finally comes back into this reverse loop here before it comes back onto it. The reverse loops require special wiring or special equipment. It's actually very easy to wire up once you have it, otherwise you'd get a short circuit, but it comes back round, and this is also a very large reverse loop. Electrically isolated, and I'll talk a little bit about how the electrics of this work in a separate video, but you can run a train continuously back and forward across these 2 reverse loops, and then you'll notice here is a point, and there's a point here. This leads on to the incline where trains can basically connect between the 2 loops. What this means in terms of operational interest, you can have a train here with a locomotive at the front that will pull out, go here onto the lower loop, go round, go up this incline, round this part of the loop here, back on itself through the reverse loop, back round this reverse loop, and then branch off here, back down the hill, onto the lower line, back round and through, through the Monbouthal station and down here into Aspinall, where it could then uncouple, run around the back of its train, and then come to the back of the train and then pull it out again. And that was sort of the idea of, can the trains go everywhere? Yes, they can. Can they connect? And can you still have plenty of operational interest? And yes, well, at least I think you can. A couple of really cool features on the railway that I really like is here. So between Barrattburg and Heffrock Station is a crossing where people can step across. This is by far the most popular part of the railway on the open days. Kids like to be able to step over it and see the trains come in. It gives this interactability where you connect the railway to the garden, and that was a big theme by building this railway, is how do you make the garden railway one together, and this kind of makes it a lot more interactable. The second most popular aspect of this is going to be this very long tunnel here. Too long before anyone comments. Yes, I cannot reach all the way into it. Fortunately, we've not had any issues. But basically, kids can stand on each side, and what they'll normally do is stand here, watch a train go into the tunnel, run all the way around here, and then watch it come out the tunnel again. And it's probably one of those really popular features of the railway. The other one is the double waterfalls here. So the water, I also like koi, I like my fish. The water comes down the waterfalls, and you've got this wonderful bridge here with some fantastic running shots of the trains passing over the water. The bridges for this need building. I've still not done it 3 years in. It's currently just supported on a few old pieces of slate that I found, but has the right effect. The two main stations are, as I mentioned, Aspinall, which sits down here, and then Steinertal station. They're the two biggest stations that kind of give the trains somewhere to go to, and then all of the stations are small passing stations. You may notice here there's a small point that goes to nowhere. Originally, the idea was that during G-Scale Society running sessions, open days for members only, we could put a spur of track off here, put a bunch of spare tracks or sidings that would only be there, only available during those open days. Realistically, it didn't work. I never used it. And the second thing is the conservatory doors that open out from the conservatory into the garden are extremely low to the ground. So you actually can't put track in front of them, you can't open them. The reason I really like the railway, and a couple of other considerations to have in mind here, is there is this view here that comes out from when you're sat in the lounge into the railway, and you can also from here in the conservatory, you can sit out and see the railway. So the railway is a really nice feature that you can see from the house, and particularly at night, you can turn the lights on and all the station lights light up. So that's it for the first part of this series. I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe so you're notified as soon as the next video in the series is out, where I'll be talking through building the railway itself. Stay tuned.